Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi, and welcome back to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, sponsored by Trailtopia. This episode is going out on Thanksgiving Day 2017, and I thought I'd tell you what I'm thankful for this year. To be honest with you, I'm thankful for a ton of things, but always top of my list is I'm thankful for my lovely wife, Diane. I'm also thankful to my friends for indulging me when I talk about the podcast and my indifferent hiking skills. And today, now here is a segue, I'm especially thankful that our guest on episode number 62 of the podcast is the incredibly popular Jessica Mills, known to one and all as Dixie. But before we get on to Dixie, there's this. How about those days when you've struggled through the morning, probably got 10 miles under your belt, and breakfast is a distant memory? It's lunchtime, and yep, you could always have your fourth Snickers of the day for yet another sugar rush. But sitting there in an empty shelter protected from the bitter wind, I'm sure you'd really rather have Trailtopia's beef-flavoured ramen noodles with green beans, corn and mushrooms. Tea-flippin'-licious. And if you need to go without the gluten, all of Trailtopia's ramen noodle lunches and light dinners are available gluten-free. Try Trailtopia Adventure Food, the best of home cooking away from home. I interviewed Dixie last year in episode number 14 when she had built a great little brand and following for her Homemade Wanderlust YouTube site. She had her videos from her AT hike along with gear choices and a particularly Dixie-type video which incorporated a picture of her sniffing her armpits and talking about hygiene on the trail. I think that it was this disarming charm that really built her audience. I don't recall how many subscribers she had at the time, but it has since exploded as she took on and completed the Pacific Crest Trail this year. She now has about 65,000 subscribers. The videos this year were awesome, but I'm sure that it's Dixie herself drawing her audience in. She's going to be along in a moment talking about the PCT. DocSpot this week has Lynn warming things up a bit after 2 weeks of freezing everybody's backside off. This week she is talking about heat-related illnesses. You're going to probably notice how little I say in this one. No, I didn't fall asleep. I was just amazed by how I'd ever survived all this dangerous stuff on the AT. Who knew? That's the point, of course. Lynn is only giving us the knowledge to avoid problems when you're out there. Lynn will be on after Dixie. Just before we actually do get to Dixie, I just wanted to fill you all in on a little bit of news I learned this week about one of our funniest guests, Edwin Thullen, or Bear. If you remember, life hadn't gone great for Bear for a number of reasons. Yet the day of our interview, life was starting to look up for him and he'd just got the job of his dreams. Then you can imagine my delight when I saw this post the other day from the Big Bear on Facebook. And I'll quote, "After living in my car for a year and living in the wilderness for 8 months, then sleeping on the floor at various locations for 10 months, I finally get to move into my own place. I have a beautiful apartment in Beverly." Isn't that awesome? I'm sure that you'll join me in sending my very best wishes to the big man. Good on you, Bear. Now, the enchanting Jessica Mills, or Dixie. Okay, back with a previous guest to the show and a PCT hiker this year. It's Jessica Mills and Dixie. Hi, Dixie. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm pretty good. And I know you've got back recently, or fairly recently, from the PCT, and I got slightly confused with your dates and times because I was watching your videos, and then I was watching on Facebook the videos were about 500 miles behind where you were, so I wasn't terribly sure how all that worked out. When did you actually start the PCT, and when did you finish?
Yes. So I started April 3rd down in Campo, and which is right there on the border of Mexico. And then I finished, I crossed over, I reached the northern terminus on October 6th, but we camped like right there. So I didn't, get into Manning Park until like October 7th. But basically April 3rd to October 6th.
So it's basically a 6-month hike.
Yep.
And how long did it take you to do the AT then?
Longer. It was like, let's see, it was March 29th to October 19th. So it was like 6.5 months, or a little more than that.
So the BTT obviously is longer miles. So is that because is it flat? Is it flatter? I know it goes much higher, but is it also less mountainous than the AT?
So as far as the grade goes, it's graded for horses in most areas. So you'll see people out there riding horses, which is definitely a difference from the AT. But the grade, the climbs are more gradual, and a lot of times once you gain that elevation, you kind of stick with it. You still have climbs, you're still sweating, you're still dreading climbs like you do on the AT. It's not a cakewalk by any means, but as far as the hand over hand stuff, and the straight up just to go straight back down, it's not as much of that as you see, on the AT. So I would say less physically demanding.
So not so many pointless ups and downs, as they say.
Yes, exactly. You still have them, and you still get a little aggravated with some of that, at certain points. But I remember the first day, my friend Park and I were walking, and the trail started going down, but there was kind of like a turnoff, and it looked like the trail could go up or down, and we were like, oh, it must go up, and then we looked and we're like, no, it goes down, and we were just, our minds were blown because we were in that AT mindset, when in doubt, go up. And so it was just like, wow, maybe this isn't going to be so bad,
Oh dear. Yes, you mentioned Perk. I've forgotten. That man has got a beard, hasn't he?
Right?
Oh my gosh.
It is so epic. Like he had a year birthday for his beard while we were out there on the trail. So it was only a year old, and I was like, I cannot believe, like, it is massive. I don't see how it only took a year to grow that, but he's got to be deficient in some nutrients or something.
He can hide an entire birthday cake in that. Oh, man, it is some beard. It really is.
It reminds me of Marge Simpson's hair. Like it should have birds living in it or something.
How did you get to hike with Perk?
So Perk and I became friends on the Appalachian Trail. He was part of my trail family, and we probably met in the Smoky Mountains. I think the first place was Franklin. But then we kind of became pretty good friends at the end of the Smokies, and actually none of my trail family from the AT finished together. But anyway, so we all kept in touch, and I was thinking about doing the PCT, and he was thinking about it, and we just kind of talked about it, and we're like, well, why don't we road trip out there together and start together? And if we finish together, fine. If not, fine, but let's at least head out there together. And we did get separated for a bit because I had to go home for my brother's graduation. So most of the Sierra Nevada, we weren't hiking together, but we ended up linking back up and finishing together. So it worked out.
Yeah. Now I saw and a lot of people I know watch your YouTube channel, and the fires this year, they were awful, weren't they?
Oh my gosh!
How much were you actually cut off from the trail? Because you would go forward, you go back, and then you find out where you were. Oh, it was a real jigsaw, wasn't it?
It's really hard to. It depends, and I'll say this. So, like on the AT, it's very simple to be. You're either a purist or you're not. You know what I mean? It's pretty black and white. You either pass every white blaze or you don't. On the PCT, there's so many closures. A lot of people just skip around them, and they'll go like from the most convenient road crossing to the next, convenient road crossing that's like, on the other side of the closure. Yeah. But the actual closure might not begin until like, 10 more miles down the trail, but there's just not a road there. So you have to go in 10 or 15 miles and turn around and come back to the road.
God.
And for me, I wanted every single open mile of trail. I wanted to walk every single foot of trail that was open. So there was a lot of doubling back. And so I think as far as the closures that I had to double back, they pretty much average out mileage wise. So there was
yes.
chunk.
10 miles in, 10 miles back. Yeah, absolutely. Quite right.
Yeah,
so, yeah,
exactly. So, it depends on how you want to count it. As far as the number of miles, on most of them, I evened out. I would say probably there was a 100-mile chunk that I missed, that there was no going in and going out or doubling back. So I would say probably instead of 2,650 miles, I probably did like 2,550. If I had to.
It looked frustrating.
A number. So.
It looked frustrating a few times.
Yeah, because you're like, adjust want to hike. And a lot of the places, are not convenient to reach and things like that. So that's, why so many people just say, forget it and skip big chunks. But
Yeah.
I couldn't do that and then feel good about saying I through hiked. So I just had to get down and dirty and make it happen. But
I actually tried to do the John Muir Trail myself this year and failed badly after 3 days for the second straight year, by the way.
I remember you saying that.
It was a nightmare.
Just the elevation.
Oh,
yeah.
Once I got above about 9,700 feet, I just turned into a crazy man. It was just horrible. It was terrible.
Yeah. I wonder if, if you weren't to do the entire, the whole PCT, if it would help, starting at a lower elevation and kind of gradually building up to it.
You know what? I just think it's. So I stayed there. I drove from here to there for 5 days. I stayed at about 9,200 feet and went down and went up to make sure I was feeling better. I felt great. But the moment I went above about 9,600 feet on the hike itself, I almost fell over. It was terrible. So I just don't think, you know what, Dixie, I don't think I can do that. So that's okay. I'm at peace with that now. And, as
long as you're at peace with it, that's okay.
Absolutely. Now, in fact, and talking about Sierras, your videos in the Sierras scared the crap out of me because a lot of the people you were hiking with were not flipping. Yeah, they're flipping. They were going up, missing out part of it. They were going to come back and so on. But you seemed so determined to carry on. And I remember watching one film, and I showed my wife as well. You got to this river, and you were scared, as you should be, by the way. And you were, you waited eventually, thank God, to be joined by a group of guys. If I can take you back to that moment, because I know a lot of people have seen it, how did you feel at that time? Were you scared?
Yes, I would say terrified, frustrated. I mean,
thank God for that. You should have been.
I know. Well, I think the whole. There was a lot of fear mongering going on with the Sierra Nevada, and I'm not going to say that the facts of so much snow has fallen, the rivers are raging, that those things weren't true, because they were true.
Yeah.
But just telling people, if you're going to go in, this is how to handle it, whatever. But just so many people are going to die, and I mean there were people who did die, So, but I don't know. It's just the way that the articles approached it, so I think that made a lot of people afraid to a lot of people didn't even go in and look at it. You know what I mean? For me, I was like, I'm going to go in and I want to stand in front of the river that makes me turn around, and then I'll be at peace with it. But I can't.
And that one didn't make you want to turn around? That one didn't make you want to turn around straight away? Oh my gosh.
Yes, but I had come too far, and I'm a stubborn person. So I don't know. But anyway, yeah. So I got in there and I was in that section with about 3 other people, but we had agreed that we weren't going to go further than a certain point, that night. And 2 of them ended up deciding they wanted to go, up over a pass anyway. So they were gone. So it was just me and this man from Australia, and we camped together. And we got up and over that pass the next morning, and he was like, I can't do this. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, I'm done. I want to turn around and go back. And how would you feel about that? And I'm like, no, do not put me in any consideration of what you decide, because you can't have somebody drown in a river because they didn't want to leave you. You know what I mean? I can't. I'm not living with that on my conscience.
Yeah.
So as much as I didn't want to be alone, I didn't want somebody out there that wasn't sure that they wanted to be there, So I just told him, I was like, whatever you need to do. So he turned around and left. And at that moment, the fear was real, because I was like, the only thing that I did not want out of this PCT hike for sure was to be in the Sierra Nevada alone. And this is exactly, and it's I knew it was going to happen, I just knew. So that whole day had been a little scary anyway. Not, seeing people and just being alone. And there had been a couple of rivers that I had gone through already that were challenging. And so when I hit the one that we're talking about, it's called White Fork. I was standing there and I knew that it looked bad, but honestly, it was worse than it looked once you were in it. And
it didn't look any better the next morning, because I saw you. I thought you were going to be swept away. They had to grab hold of you, didn't they?
Well, so in one of them they did, yes. And,
that's right.
So,
that's
but
the other one, yeah.
Yeah, this is when I met all of them. So I was alone and I started going across the river. And I mean, I got about halfway, and the second half was a lot worse than the first half. And I mean, you could look when you were in it and tell that, so my legs started slipping. And the problem with this particular river is downstream, I had already seen, it was just like a rock chute. I think they call it like the rock slide or the rock something. So there was no hope of like grabbing a bush or a log or anything like that. Like you were a goner, and then upstream, it was just like rock cliffs. So like that was the spot to cross. There was no going and finding a log or any of that, it was just like, that's it. And I was pushing so hard to get across it because I wanted to set myself up to go over the next pass early in the morning. So when you go over these passes, you want to do them, not in the heat of the day. So everything's slushy. You want, your spikes to bite into it.
Sure.
And so anyway, I was just like, I'm doing this, this is not going to stop me. So I get halfway across and I feel my legs giving. And I can't explain to you, but there's like this moment where you almost want to give up. Like, it's like this moment where you're just like, I just can't like fight it anymore. You just almost want to say, I don't care. Like, just let it sweep me away, So, but then there's some part of you that's just like, not today. And I mean, I literally screamed out, not today. And I turned around somehow and walked back to the bank. And I had to like grab some bushes and pull myself up to get back. And I just sat there and I cried. I mean, I was so frustrated with myself for trying it alone, first of all. Frustrated with myself for being alone, just everything. And so I set up my tent right there on the trail because that was the only spot. And then I was just like, well, I guess I'll try it in the morning. Maybe my legs will be stronger and less tired and whatever. And the next thing I know, these guys come rolling up, these 4 guys, and we camped there together. And the next morning we crossed together, and the water wasn't that much lower, but I think,
safety in numbers every time. Safety in numbers as well.
And just the numbers and yeah, exactly. So it ended up being a really good thing out of a really bad situation that could have been worse. You know what I mean? So,
I'm sure a lot of people who watch it, because certainly I was watching it and I didn't actually know how far ahead you were, and I presumed you were, but I didn't have any news of you at all. So, and I was watching it and I felt a genuine wave of relief come over me when I saw those guys turn up. It was amazing. It was incredible. It's like watching a live action movie, and it was a great thing.
Yeah, they were amazing. They're like brothers to me now, and I mean, we hiked the rest of the Sierra Nevada together, So,
and how did you cope with the altitude then on Whitney and the Sierras in general? Because I know that Whitney isn't part of the PCT, is it? You just took a little side route up to 14,600 feet.
Yeah, right.
As you do.
Yeah, it's like an 8-mile from the John Muir / PCT side. It's only like 8 miles. So I could definitely tell that I got out of breath, when I got higher up. Right. And we did a midnight, midnight summit or a nighttime summit, and so we could watch the sunrise.
Of course.
And so it was pretty exhausting. It's the craziest feeling to just be walking, even sometimes on flat-ish ground, and just to feel like all the energy is leaving your body.
Yeah.
But so I just, just kind of slow and steady and, got up there and took a nap up there and then, took my time getting back down. But I think the main thing with something like that is making sure that you have plenty of time, So I had literally all day to do it, It was a little push to get up there by sunrise, but
that was something, and that looked fabulous up there as well. That just looked extraordinary. The view from there must have been great. Yeah,
and really cold.
And that's what I was looking forward to. And the fact that I couldn't do it, I had to quit at the same place twice, was just very dispiriting. I'm going to tell you. Anyway, that's the way it goes.
I'm sure that's very frustrating.
I'll tell you where you weren't slow and steady was your 24-hour challenge. And I almost didn't believe it when I flicked back YouTube to see if you had actually said what you said. 62 bloody miles in 24 hours.
Yes.
Oh,
I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but I don't know. There's something about the spirit of competition that it will just drive you. But so the way that I even came up with it is Kyle had mentioned that he did a 24-hour challenge while he was on the Pacific Crest Trail. And so I was like, well, I ought to try that, and max at that time, I think, was 54.5 miles. And I was like, I doubt there's any way that I could do that. But, so it was kind of something in the back of my mind that I wanted to do. And then Perk mentioned, a 24-hour challenge. And he's like, we have to Scott Jurek Mayer, meaning like, we have to, just by like 0.1 or 0.2, we've got to like top his mileage, And so Perk had mentioned it. I was already thinking about it. And then I just happened to be looking at the terrain ahead, and I noticed that it was going to be, relatively flat, or at least gradual, elevation changes and stuff in the next like 60 something mile stretch up to Bernie. So it was like, I think 61.2 miles from where we were going to camp to there. And so I was like, let's do it. If we're going to do it, this should be the stretch that we do it. And I never imagined that I could actually break 60 miles. I mean, the most I ever did on that.
You look like you walked through the. You did look like you walked through the tiredness. You at the end of it, after about 18 hours, you were looking tired, but at the end of it, you looked as fresh as a daisy. It was amazing.
I mean, it was like I hit my second wave. Yeah. I don't know what happened, but there was just, I don't know. There came a point where. Well, I tell you, I didn't know where the guys were because they were behind me, and it was me, Perk, and then two other guys that were doing it. And so I thought that I was the only one still doing it because I hadn't seen them since like 11. But I finally got service, and I got a message from Perk, and he told me where he was, and I told him where I was, and he was like, "Dixie, I think you can really do it. Like, I think if you try hard, you can break 60 miles." And I was like, I don't know. And then I calculated, and I'm like, I think he's right. And I just started like running. I mean, I was like sprinting. But the funny thing is, when I hit the road to Bernie, which is the town that we were going into, it was only 61.2 miles. So I had to cross the road and keep going because I had 15 minutes left. So I was like, I'm not stopping the 24-hour challenge at 23 hours and 45 minutes. I have to continue. So anyway, 62 even. So it was, I know. And some people didn't believe me. And I was like, I literally, my feet feel it. I promise.
Did you feel pretty rough the next day? Or I can't remember, did you take it to 0 the next day or what?
Yeah, I didn't take a 0, I guess, because, I had hiked that day and I hiked out the next day. But we got there and we couldn't check into the room until like 3 o'clock or something like that. So, so I had to walk around town like a zombie, trying to get some chores done. But about 5 o'clock, I hit the bed, and I don't think I left it until like, 9 or 10 the next morning. But and then I ate breakfast and hit the trail. So it was a Nero.
Wow.
But, yeah.
Another thing that really made me laugh on your video was every now and then you would get pissed with somebody or something. And there was a particular rant you had with, is it Mount Shasta Post Office, I think it was.
Yes.
You were so unhappy with them, but you were just talking.
That sounds like a chihuahua barking.
Yeah, but what you were trying to apologize for being angry. It was really funny.
Yeah. Well, because I hate, like, to me, there's really no sense in continuous negativity. You know what I mean? I feel like kind of what you...
Of course.
Put out is what you get back. If you try to think positively and being, optimist or at least a realist, like you get that back rather than just like a negative Nancy all the time. So I just hate fussing. But to me, when I feel like there's something to be learned from the situation, then it's worth it. You know what I mean?
Of course it is. Yeah.
Yeah. But
that was funny. I strongly recommend that episode, the one where you're having to go about Mount Shasta Post Office and the 24-hour challenge, which were great. And your video editor, is he a different editor this year? I presume somebody else edits your videos, do they?
Yes.
He is amazing. They were amazing, I tell you.
It's like he gets my brain or something. I don't know. Like he has a way of expressing what I want to, but he makes. I told him, I was like, I feel like you're the artist, and I'm just like supplying you the colors. Like I give you the colors to paint with when he like paints this masterpiece. But yeah, I mean it's the craziest thing. So when the girl that was doing it before decided not to anymore, I was working at like an outdoor store here, and I was working with him, and he went to school for video editing and that was involved in his degree. But anyway, so we got to talking about it, and he was like, well, I could probably do it for a little while, and I was like, all right. So he did it for, I don't know, probably close to a year before I left to go. And so he was like, well, I'll just keep doing it for the trail. And I was like, all right. So he did, and he does a really, really good job.
He really does. I was going to ask you, did you have the use of a drone? And I may have missed it in one of the earlier ones, but you must have had the use of a drone. And how did that all come about?
So, he had mentioned it. Aaron is the fellow that edits my videos, and he had mentioned it to me. You ought to get a drone. And I was like, and I just laughed at him, and then I started thinking about it while I was out there hiking. I mean, you know how when you're hiking, your brain just can wander freely, and I started thinking, I'm like, how can I make these videos better? And I don't know if, how you feel about like Instagram and all that, but to me, like when you edit, a video or a picture or anything like that, it's not so much that you're trying to make it look better than it was, but to me, you're trying to like give the feel of how it felt when you were there. Like you want people to understand,
totally.
How it felt.
Definitely.
So I was like, how could I get, a different angle or something different to show really what I'm seeing out here, like the vast beauty and the, just anything. And so I just thought like, wow, a drone would really help with that. And so when I came home from my brother's graduation, we talked about it more because he lives here in town. And I was like, you know what, I think you're right. I think I should get a drone. And I didn't really get to practice with it much, but so I had some crash landings and things. But yeah, and then you have to pay attention too, like to where you can legally fly them and where you can legally have them. And so sometimes there's you have to bounce them ahead and things like that. But
aren't the trails a great place to do it though? Yeah,
they are. But as far as like national parks, you can't have them, and wilderness areas. So you have to, and then knowing when you're in those areas and all that. Yeah. It's kind of tedious, but it's worth it.
Well, you used it sparingly. Which was good, because too much of it would have been literally that. Too much of it, wouldn't it? And it was perfect. Exactly. Every now and then there were some great shots. There really were.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
I tell you, yours. I'm sure yours was the most followed channel this year, because and I made a note of this yesterday. I was going to write, you've got over 50,000 viewers. As of yesterday, you had 66,534 subscribers to your YouTube page, which is amazing, And for those of you, I can't believe there are anybody who doesn't know, but Dixie's YouTube page is Homemade Wanderlust. And I noticed recently you started selling your knife that you had around your neck on your site as well. It's quite an interesting development. Are you going to be selling more stuff on the site?
I am. So the knives are a limited edition, and there's only, like a certain number of them that I'm doing, but I am going to do more like merch type things. I'm actually right now trying to pull together a calendar, so that may be up soon, and some other things, but it's just one thing at a time, to see kind of how it works out. But yeah, I've had people, asking me for things like that. And so I thought, well, I guess I might as well give it a go. And several people had mentioned the knives and, asked me where I got them and all of that. And then I guess a couple people had requested to Patrick, which is the guy with mtknives.net is who's doing the knives. But they had mentioned that they would like one with my logo on it, and so he approached me and said, "Hey, how do you feel about this?" And that the rest is history. So we decided to pull together and make it happen.
Actually, before we leave your YouTube channel, I just want to give a shout out, and I promised that I would, and I hope you don't mind, to a guy called Jack Bellamy. Yeah. He listens to the show, and he says his daughter Leah and his niece Abby, and her trail name is Bubbly Squirrel, which is a great trail name, by the way.
I love that.
They absolutely love your videos on YouTube. So I think you'd like to know that as well.
That is awesome. No, I really do appreciate that. And, I don't think people realize, and I'm sure you can, agree with this, that like when you get positive feedback, like it's really a good feeling. You're like, wow,
totally.
Because it's something that you love to do anyway. And so when somebody's like, hey, I like that, you're like, thank you so much.
I got an email this morning from a guy, I won't say his name, who says that listening to my guests on my podcast has inspired him to get out hiking, and he wanted to do as much as he could this year. And he's done all of Georgia. And he says, I've decided that's my Katahdin. And then thanks so much to you and your guests for for giving me the encouragement to get off my arse and go and hike. Isn't that a great thing?
See, that just gives me chill bumps. Like, that's just amazing. Because, there was something, whether it was a person, an event, something that was a catalyst to make you do it, and it's
Absolutely.
like, if you can just pay that back and be that for one person, it's just the most amazing thing in the world. And that's what we should be doing as people, is encouraging and inspiring each other, not, being hateful and tearing each other down.
And I know I've mentioned this before, that I went to Trail Days this year, and I missed you. I know you were there with Carl, and I'd heard so much negativity about the class of 2018 on the AT. I did not meet a single person who was rude, negative, or unfriendly. And I think it's and I'm sure it's social media who only pick out the crap things in people, and they only want to report and tell tales on bad things on people.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm so glad I went there. I mean, it was an interesting thing for me to go to anyway.
Well, dadgum, I wish that we had seen each other. We're gonna have to remedy that at some point.
So. Well, you're in Florida, I'm in Florida, which means we're about 600 miles apart, but it's a big old state. Now, to me, the PCT looks more grueling in many ways than the AT. Can you summarise what the main difference is, as far as you were concerned, between the AT and the PCT?
Yeah. So I guess I should say that in general, like when you compare the two mountain ranges, the AT is an older mountain range. The Appalachian mountains just have more history and culture and soul, and all of that incorporated into it. Yeah, exactly. It's like this magical, special thing. I don't know, and the community around it, reflects that. And then you've got the mountains on the West Coast that are, and I hate when people say Pacific Coast Trail. Oh, God. Okay, but anyway, because there's no coast, you don't see the beach. But anyway, so out there in the Sierra Nevada and the Cascades and all of that, it's more wild. It's more like epic and more adventurous, so, but also more desolate. It's not, it doesn't have that warm and fuzzy feeling that the AT does. So I would say definitely like the culture of each trail, and yes, the AT is more physically challenging, but I would say the Pacific Crest Trail is certainly like more of a mental challenge, just knowing that, you are more so in the middle of nowhere with, with help and miles and miles and miles away, and you do have to worry about water a little bit more and longer stretches,
I saw that.
Food and so, I mean, and sure, I guess the wildlife, might be a little more dangerous, but that's not to discourage anyone, from either trail. I mean, I did meet people on both trails that was their first backpacking trip. That was their first through hike. So it's not that you can't do the PCT successfully, as your first through hike or backpacking trip or anything like that. But there is less room for error. I would say that. And in a normal year, the Sierra Nevada is not as,
not as dangerous,
or scary or
not
whatever.
As dangerous. Yeah. Right.
So, I say that, that the Appalachian Trail, gave me like love and soul and peace. And then the Pacific Crest Trail tried to rob it all from me, and tried to kill my soul.
What is the one in 60 years' time when you're old and grey, and one day, believe me, you're going to go grey like everybody else does? What are you going to think back at, and which one do you think will make you smile the most?
The Appalachian Trail. Hands down.
That's interesting.
I mean, and mainly it's that culture thing, on the Pacific Crest Trail, it takes longer to get a trail name. I noticed that people, it was, 700 miles in, it's like, what's your name? Oh, Emily. I'm sorry.
Interesting.
What do you mean?
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing. And then even towards the end, you still have people that don't really take the trail name thing like serious. They're like, oh, well, I'm, Hamburger, but Emily's my real name, and while on the AT, you'd be like, I am Hamburger, and even if you go to a restaurant somewhere and you have to give them your name, it's Hamburger, it's like, there is no, well, I guess I'll use my, synthetic world name here, but so, yeah, I don't know. It's the culture is definitely different. And it's not that people on the PCT are mean or anything like that, it's just different. So.
Yeah, and different's good. Different is always good.
It
Now,
is.
I know that Carl did some of the CDT this year, a lot of the CDT this year.
Yes.
But the two of you are kind of planning to attack it at some stage. Is it going to be next year?
Yes, in the spring.
Oh, right.
So he started a southbound hike this year, and once he hit Colorado, he kind of had to make a decision because the trail was just, covered in fresh snow. So the CDT is kind of like a choose your own adventure trail. I think there is a lot of road walking and there are a lot of alternates, but he was like, I didn't come to road walk Colorado. I came to do the CDT. So he didn't feel good, I guess, about like earning his Triple Crown road walking, so he was like, I'll just wait. And I told him, I was like, well, if you start with me, I'm going north next year. So if you're really set on like, hitting that year mark, because, you got 12 months to do your through hike. So he could finish it within that 12 months still if he wanted to, but he's like, I'll probably just end up going completely, the whole way again. So we'll see.
So
yeah.
How different do you think that will be? Because you've hiked with other people all the time. This is a guy, your boyfriend, and so obviously you're in a relationship. How different do you think that's going to be?
I don't know. I think very, very different because I'm a pretty independent person and hiker. Even Perk and I, he's one of my best friends, and even the two of us would certainly not camp the same place every night. He actually said something one day about Dixie, it's really nice hiking with you, and I was like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, as in I enjoy seeing you during coffee in the morning, maybe at lunch, and then at camp at night, and that's good enough. And I'm like,
funny.
Same to you.
That's funny.
So yeah, but when Kyle came out and hiked a piece of the desert with me when he was courting me, I guess you could say, trying to win me over. So anyway, he came out there and
it worked, obviously.
I mean, and I remember asking Perk, I was like, why is this guy coming out here anyway? Like, why would he want to come to the desert? And Perk's like, you're an idiot, Dixie. He's coming to hike with you. And I was like, oh, okay. But so yeah, we got along great, in that stretch, and then he came at the end. So I don't know.
That was very cool. That was very cool. He came at the end of it.
Yes, cool. I was so surprised. Like I'm just like hiking along, thinking he's in Colorado.
Was that genuine surprise?
Yes,
surprise?
Yeah, I did not. I had no idea that he was coming.
That is
So yeah, I looked up and I'm just hitting a path, and I'm just hiking, and I look up and I hear, is this the way to Mexico? And he's hiking south, and I was like, does not compute. My mind just didn't understand.
I thought you were a bit slow. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, wait, what? Like, what are you doing here? But yeah, cool. It was a really great surprise and kind of the cherry on the top of the sundae for the end of the trail there. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about it.
So what do you think do you have any idea of the next 5 years, or do you just take it year by year, see how things go? Or do you have a goal for the next 5 years?
That's a really good question. I know the Triple Crown for sure. Obviously that's kind of since 2015, after I got done with the AT, that's kind of been like my mission. But I do want to continue the channel, and I want to continue putting out content and traveling. I don't know. I would like to do some hiking overseas. Not exactly sure where yet, but I guess that'll be one of the main things that I can think about while I'm on the CDT, is like, oh, where next? Yes. But definitely not done with backpacking by any means, or, putting out videos on, backpacking adventures. So,
well, somebody on your Facebook page today suggested you do that new 15,000 miles they got in Canada.
Yeah, I know.
That's a long way.
I know.
That's a long way.
Somebody's got to do it. So part of me is like, I want to do that, but part of me wants to do Everest too. You know what I mean? It's just like,
oh my gosh. Oh dear me.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. I am going to do something though, but I don't know. I may have had enough of Canada just with Manning Park. I don't know. As far as long distance trails goes, not that I wouldn't enjoy visiting there or anything like that, but I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, I would like to continue, basically what I'm doing, but just do it in other places. And, as far as like I mean, sure, marriage and children and all of those things, have always been something in my mind, but those are things that, happen when they happen. So,
Absolutely.
but, I don't
Absolutely
know,
right.
I guess
Absolutely
somebody
right.
needs to have a backpacking channel about, how to travel with children. So, hey,
There you go. There you
somebody's got
go.
to do it, but,
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you what. I've watched all your videos of your journey this year. I thought it was a great video log, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I was so pleased when I saw that you finished as well. And as always, you've been a delight on the show, and I really appreciate you giving us your time. And hopefully, we're going to catch up again sometime soon.
Yeah, no, it's been wonderful. I'm glad that you let me come back on and chat with you for a little while.
Anytime. But lovely to speak to you, and I'll speak with you soon. Okay.
All right, sounds good.
Cheers, then. Bye.
Bye.
Isn't she something? I tell you, watching that video when she was alone in the Sierra Nevada gave me real anxiety. And her video editor really brings it home every time. I also loved her answer to my question about which trail will make her smile when she's older. The magic of the AT is hard to deny when you've been on it. Mind you, Dixie and the mayor on the CDT next year will be quite a story as well. Plenty to look forward to with those two. Oh yeah, did we get a bit of a world exclusive about the future? Marriage? Kids? Love it. We got a few more 5-star ratings this week, as well as a review from the exotically named Shigibum. Shigibum says that he or she found your podcast several months ago and have listened to them all. That is dedication, Shigibum. He or she also says that the conversations on the show give me both inspiration and technical information. That's what we're trying to achieve, Shigibum. I'm glad you enjoy it. So, with 89 reviews on iTunes, all of which are 5-star, we got our first 4-star. Darn it. By the way, a quick shout out to my friend Grizz. Grizz always mentions the podcast when he responds to Facebook posts about backpacking when the person who's posting wants info for their upcoming hike. Thanks a lot, Grizz. And if some of you who enjoy the show follow Grizz's example, I would be absolutely delighted. DocSpot this week is all about heat-related illness. Once more, I learned way more than I could ever have imagined. Lynn has been so diligent in putting these together, and I know that many of you have really appreciated that effort. Thanks, Lynn. Here's this week's DocSpot. Okay, back with Lynn again. Hi, Lynn. How are you?
I'm great. How about yourself?
Well, I'm good, and I thought we were doing hypothermia today, but we're not. And we're doing heat-related illness, which I thought was hypothermia. So you need to explain that to me because I totally don't understand that.
Okay, so heat-related illness is a group of illnesses. We all probably think about hyperthermia kind of the same way in various gradations, but they're actually it's a family of different syndromes that's all associated with excessive heat in the outdoors. Where the body's heat accumulates faster than the body can get rid of it. So you have heat-related illness includes heat edema, heat cramps, heat syncope, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke, in addition to hyperthermia.
Are they extremes? Are they gradated, getting worse and worse and worse? Is that what that means?
Yeah, essentially they are. Heat edema and heat cramps are kind of mild heat-related illness. Edema is the fancy medical term for swelling. Right. And most of us, if we've hiked in the summertime, have noticed, our hands get swollen, our feet get swollen.
Yeah.
And easily relieved by just, raising your feet when you get into camp. Some people say that hiking with trekking poles actually helps reduce the swelling in their hands because they're not dangling them so much. They're actually holding them at a 90-degree angle all the time.
How anybody hikes with that trekking poles, I have no idea, by the way. Just as I fell over with them, so God knows what I'd be like without them.
Yeah, I know. They're a part of my routine now. It's
absolutely,
just the way I go.
Absolutely, yeah. So heat cramps.
Heat cramps are another part of the mild part of heat-related illness, and those are painful muscle cramps that we get during or immediately after exercise. You might mistake those for cramps that you do to your exercise, but they're a little different because heat cramps actually affect the entire body. Whereas if you're getting a cramp from, let's say, going up the side of a mountain. Like for me,
Sure.
my calves, the first hour of my hiking of the day, my calves will be very cramped.
Yes.
In heat cramps, you're going to get cramps in your neck or in your arms or, in your back. And heat cramps are actually relieved with hydration and electrolyte solution, whereas exercise-induced cramps are actually relieved by rest. So there is a different reasoning there why you get one person.
I think I had that one day. I remember being really, really hot somewhere after the Grayson Highlands, and I said I must drink water, but I was in pain. I was in a lot of felt like muscular pain. Maybe it was cramps, and it did go away very, very quickly after I started downing quite a bit of water.
Yep. That was probably heat cramps. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So then you have heat syncope, and syncope, again, is a big fancy medical term for fainting. This is a temporary loss of consciousness. It sounds a lot worse than it is. You basically faint, and then when you're lying supine, flat, the blood comes back to your head, and you're fine. But that's a signal that, okay, you need to stop. You need to drink some water.
Sure.
You need to just cool down a little bit. Then you get into the more serious parts of heat-related illness where you get heat exhaustion and heat stroke. We probably, hikers, have all experienced some sort of heat exhaustion. The symptoms include very intense thirst, weakness, nausea, dizziness. You'll feel very dry, hot skin, and you'll actually have decreased urine output.
Yeah.
So I tell you, I feel like I actually got that one time this summer when I was out mowing my lawn. I was doing it for 2.5 hours in this 90-degree, 90% humidity, and I just felt awful, absolutely awful.
Well, I was actually hiking up one hill somewhere. I think it was somewhere in Virginia. Good chance, I guess. And I thought I could hear something running up behind me. I turned round. But it was my own heart. I could hear my own heart. It was so hot that day, and I was sweating profusely, and my heart was thumping massively, really, really fast.
Wow!
And I can remember it like it was yesterday. It frightened the life out of me, I tell you.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah,
I was very, very near a shelter, so it wasn't too bad.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, because that's a good segue. What do you do when you feel like this? You have to move into a cooler environment.
Yeah.
You try to get some shade. You try to get, maybe into the trees or something, and you stop. You rest. Stop your physical activity.
Sure.
And you have to now rehydrate with both water and electrolytes. If you have Gatorade or if you have some sort of electrolyte solution, that's really, really important. Loosen your clothes a little bit so the air can circulate, and you can fan yourself to, keep the cooling going. But you must do that until your symptoms resolve. And they resolve fairly quickly. You won't feel as nauseated. You'll feel a little bit more energetic. You'll calm down, and you won't feel as dizzy. So it's pretty instantaneous once the body gets what it needs that get back to normal.
Right.
Then you have heat stroke, which is really severe. That's where a victim will have altered mental status. They could have seizures and even coma. This is where the core body temperature is now higher than 104.
Wow, that's hot, man.
It's very hot, yeah. This is where protein breaks down in the body, and it's a very serious situation, and that patient or victim needs to be evacuated.
Okay.
If you're in a group hiking and one of your number develops this type of heat stroke, you need to get help immediately. But you can help them in the meantime while you're waiting for evacuation. And that is, again, move them into shade, loosen any restrictive clothing, let the air circulate on the skin. And if you have access to cool water, like stream or a lake, you can perform what's called the cold water immersion therapy, which is the best field treatment that you can do for heat-related illness. Remove all the clothing and equipment from the victim and submerge them up to their neck, basically, trunk and extremities.
Yeah.
But make sure you gotta protect against currents in a fast-flowing stream. Make sure their head won't go under. You have to remember that they can't think for themselves. They can't do for themselves. So you actually, oftentimes, you'll have to go in with them. Do not leave them alone. If you don't have access to a body of water, then you can spray or douse water on the extremities and the trunk and then fan the victim. That's another way of helping to cool them down as much as possible.
But you say by that stage that the person actually needs to be evacuated anyway. So all the time, whatever happens, even if they cool down, they still need to be evacuated because some sort of damage has happened because of this heat stroke.
Exactly.
Okay.
This is helping, the faster you get the treatment, the more likely the patient will be able to recover uninjured.
Okay.
So that's why this cold water immersion therapy is important.
So how do you prevent getting it in the first place then?
Pretty straightforward. You have to make sure that you stay hydrated. And it's important to drink to match your thirst. And this is the body is very resilient. It will tell you when it's thirsty. So you drink. If you're no longer thirsty, you can stop drinking. And this is important because you also don't want to overhydrate with just plain water, because then you might develop what we call hyponatremia, which is a low sodium level. And that has its own issues. It's actually in the field, it looks very similar to heat stroke and heat exhaustion. It's when you get to medical therapy that it's treated a little bit differently.
So I understand that. So so there is a danger of over drinking if you just drink water. Is that right?
Yes,
right, okay.
Because what's happening is you're not replenishing your sodium and your potassium, your other electrolytes that you lost through sweat. You're just replenishing the water. So not only have you lost the electrolytes, but now you're diluting out the few electrolytes that you still have, and that can cause a further problem. Sodium, potassium, calcium, all those are important for cells to function, muscles to function, for the brain to function. So it's really important to have a good balance there. Okay,
so it's difficult to know then the balance. So you're basically saying stop. When you're not thirsty anymore, you can stop because you've done as much as you need, but you should always be watching out for your electrolytes anyway and always be replenishing those. Do you tend to put electrolytes in your water every time you drink water, or do you do it every other time? How do you work that out?
I guess that's an individual situation. People will have to kind of know their bodies.
Yeah.
Generally, I would probably recommend, every other liter maybe, to put some electrolytes in.
That's actually what I did when I was away. When I was hiking, I did that every other litre, so it kind of worked out. Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's probably a good, safe rule of how you can properly rehydrate.
And you've written here, actually, for which I should take offence, but I don't. Mad dogs and Englishmen, which of course go out in the midday sun. But frankly, when you're hiking the trail, people do pretty much carry on hiking throughout the day, don't they? And it is an excessive high exertion activity. I mean, that's what it is. And at the peak of the day, people rarely rest. But I suppose, I don't know. I wonder how practical it is actually to stop all the time. Although I did meet a number of people who would actually stop at a shelter and sleep for 2 hours at lunchtime, then do another 15 miles in the afternoon after sleeping 2 hours out of the sun at lunchtime. So perhaps that did make sense.
Yeah, and again, it's individual. This is part of the hike your own hike regime.
Yeah,
if
sure.
you are able to carry on hiking through very hot, very humid weather, then go for it. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you are able to manage and not develop hyponatremia and hyperthermia.
Yeah.
And some people will like to rest, and that's a great time of the day to rest, because then you can not exert yourself so much. You can let the hot air cool down a little bit, the ambient air, and your body is charged up, ready for the next leg of the trip. But no, you don't have to. If you feel that your body can actually handle it, then it's perfectly fine.
Yeah. And
it's a guideline.
You did mention in here somewhere about using ibuprofen, which I know you're not a big fan of anyway. And you compound the problem of hyponatremia by using ibuprofen. Oh my gosh. I did that all the time.
Again, I don't mind ibuprofen, but if you're using it too much, and you're dehydrated already, and you're trying to replenish with just water, that can again affect the kidneys, so that you actually worsen the syndrome of hyponatremia.
Okay, hyponatremia. I'll have to think about that a bit more. Because firstly, I'd never heard of the word, which doesn't help me, obviously.
Yeah, it's Latin
secondly,
for low sodium level in the blood.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yes.
That should sum it up then. Okay. Well, that's great. That's very, very helpful. I really appreciate it. Another thing which just exposes my total ignorance on this subject, and I'm sure there are others out there thinking the same, and I really appreciate you just filling. And I tell people that Lynn does a lot of research into this stuff, so she's very, very based in fact, and I get these pieces of paper which she sends me, and I read them all, and I think I understand about one word in three, and I just didn't, and I didn't know any of this stuff at all. And some of the things that I've learned are quite a shock. But once again, as we always say, you're pretty much okay out there. You just have to be careful. And if something does happen, the purpose of all these is just to make sure you're okay and you recognise what's happening to you and you respond accordingly. And with a bit of luck, Lynn would have given you all the tools you need to respond to anything that happens to you on the trail.
Right. That's the whole bottom line. Being prepared.
Exactly.
And then you get a chance to enjoy it.
Exactly that, yeah. Well, thanks very much indeed again, Lynn. And hopefully we're going to have another one for them all soon.
Great. Looking forward to it.
Okay, take it easy. Bye.
Bye-bye.
As I said, I was a little bit on the quiet side there. I'm learning, just like I imagine most of you are learning. Don't forget to listen to Returning to Katahdin, an Appalachian Trail Dream, our sister show where we track Bruce Mattson as he prepares for his 2018 through hike. Like this show, we're trying to consistently put out a podcast each week. You can find it first thing on a Monday morning on iTunes and other places where you listen to podcasts. Now, having had the wondrous Dixie on the show, it seemed a great time to also interview her boyfriend, Kyle Roerig, or the mayor. I promised we'd be talking with Kyle in the very first podcast I made. It has taken me 61 episodes to fulfill that promise, and Kyle will be our guest next week. He's a really chilled bloke and seems an excellent foil for Dixie's bubbly personality. He was a great guy to interview, and I'm sure you're going to all enjoy hearing his story. This week, I'm on to the first part of Chapter 2 of Earl Schaefer's Walking with Spring. It's been a bit of an eye-opener for me to see that the problems and circumstances that we all face in the woods today have been with hikers for generations. To be honest, I found it strangely comforting. 2 examples come in this reading. Earl discovers the unparalleled joys of hiker hunger, which of course goes along with the ability to eat anything, absolutely anything, without putting on weight. He also has some interesting reflections on the importance of mental preparation. I'll see you all next week. Walking with Spring by Earl Schaefer, Chapter 2, Land of the Noonday Sun. Far bells were somewhere ringing out on the mountains high, their silver voices singing allegro to the sky. The fog was burning off as the lone expedition crossed into North Carolina. The forest growth showed fresh and green as brilliant sunlight broke through. Then horse tracks appeared along an uphill stretch for at least a mile. Thinking the rider might be a beautiful southern belle on a morning meander, I even went to the trouble of combing my hair. The tracks finally turned aside, suggesting that a cattleman was checking livestock, chiefly hogs. Whenever I neared a group, they would scatter pell-mell while bells on the leaders would tinkle merrily. Foraging is allowed on national forest lands in the south, just as in the western states. Nantahala is a Cherokee name meaning Land of the Noonday Sun, a fitting name for a region where ravines are so deep and the slopes so steep that lowlands are in shadow most of the time. Often, the slopes are so heavily covered with brush and greenbrier that the tops of the spurs and ridges are the only routes that can be traversed. Place names are often unusual, either of Indian origin or of typical mountaineer description. One ridge in this region is called Chunky Gal Mountain. To the east, within another curve of the Blue Ridge, is the spectacular Tallulah Gorge. This stream, with headwaters all around the Great Curve, flows directly south to Burton Reservoir. In this section, the trail was often impeded by blowdowns, trees of various sizes that had been uprooted or broken off by windstorms. Getting over, under, or around these was a tiresome business, but this alone could not account for the fact my strength was waning. At times it was necessary to stretch out on the ground for a few minutes to recuperate, or to sit on a tree trunk momentarily while stepping over. Something definitely was wrong. Otherwise, the lone expedition had settled down, with my feet toughened, my pack streamlined and drawn in at the top for better balance, for easier passage under obstructions, and for better all-round handling. Low rigging seemed best on narrow side-hill footing and over rocks as well as uphill. The nagging problem was my growing weakness. It was now a case of shape up or head for the nearest bus or train station while strength remained to get off the mountain. About noon I stopped at a spring to cook. Considering that meals had sometimes been missed altogether because of rainy weather, I decided to cook a double amount so that some could be kept and eaten cold if no fire was possible that evening. To my amazement, the entire kettleful of sawdust pudding disappeared like magic, along with half a pound of brown sugar, a can of milk and some raisins. Almost instantly my legs lost that leaden feeling and I felt like hiking again. It had been a case of starvation, pure and simple, despite no unusual sensation of hunger. From that time on, my strength increased and so did my food bill. Fog closed in again as I passed a deserted logging camp and then came to Deep Gap Campground. Because of the dense fog, I didn't spot the shelter and started up the switchback trail to the fire tower on the summit where a sign said that this was Standing Indian, elevation 5498 feet. The view from this magnificent summit, known as the Grandstand of the Southern Appalachians, is usually far-reaching in every direction. Right then, it was practically zero. The tower loomed like an embattled outpost, defying the overwhelming forces of nature gone mad. Thick grey waves of fog were pouring across the peak in a vaporous flood. The mountain seemed to be tilting away from that raging current. The feeling was much like that in a hurricane. Not wanting to spend the night under such conditions, the tower was locked and deserted, I scurried down the far slope in the fading daylight, reaching Beach Gap in the deep dark. That definitely was one of the worst nights on the entire trip. No fire and boggy ground underneath. At least no mosquitoes were active because of the cold wind, no doubt. Naturally, my morning start was soon. At the first stream I tried to cook, but conditions were so poor that a match went out before it had burned halfway. About noon I reached a drier spot and managed a meal. Meanwhile, the trail route had turned north again after dipping almost to Georgia, forming still another Blue Ridge curve enclosing the headwaters of the Nantahala River flowing northward. Actually, the water divide trends to the east from this point as a lower ridge enclosing the jumbled uplands of central North Carolina, with literally thousands of tops and pinnacles. All the waters within this region of heavy rainfall eventually reach the Mississippi River through deep gorges in the high ridges to the northwest. Many minerals of good quality and quantity are found in central North Carolina, and mining is a leading industry. Instead of twisting through these jumbled uplands, the Appalachian Trail trends northwestward through the Nantahala region on a dominant cross-ridge to the Great Smoky Range. Perhaps in the future, an alternate route of the trail could follow the eastern water divide and eventually cross Mount Mitchell and Grandfather Mountain before rejoining the AT again in southern Virginia. This is the route projected in Benton MacKay's original sketch. As a whole, the mountains of western North Carolina are extremely rugged, including the highest, most jumbled terrain in all the Appalachian system. Between the low east rim and the towering Smokies are high cross ridges and great enclosed valleys, so isolated that for many years each was almost a world of its own. This complex structure was first explored and mapped more than 100 years ago by a distinguished educator, Professor Arnold Guyot of Princeton University and originally from Switzerland. His manuscript, Notes on the Geography of the Mountain District of Western North Carolina, was submitted to the government in Washington in 1863, seemingly for military use in the Civil War. It lay in government files forgotten until discovered and published in the 1930s. The manuscript was amazingly accurate and contained an incredible amount of first-hand information. Weather improved, the sun shining occasionally as I cruised northward over good trail and came in early evening to Wallace Gap, named, according to local legend, for a man who once fought a panther there with only a knife. While easing myself onto a bank to rest, I heard a car coming up a dirt road from the left. It stopped, and a large man wearing high leather boots swung one foot to the running board and sat there looking me over. Pinned to his shirt was a big silver badge. Apparently, he was puzzled and was waiting for me to make the next move. Weary or not, it was time for me to stand up and explain myself. His expression changed when he learned I was trail hiking. It was Game Protector Buchanan of the Southern District of Nantahala National Forest. He and his son, who was driving, were headed for Rainbow Springs, and he said to put my pack in the trunk if I wanted to go to the store. Why he mentioned the store became evident later. On the winding road downward, we passed many abandoned houses. Rainbow Springs was a ghost town, once a logging centre, but the timber had run out. It had no post office now, but Mr. Buchanan said that mail directed there might have gone to Prentice, the nearest post office, and I could meet the rural mailman the next day. At the lower end of the town were a few occupied houses and a little old store. Outside was a cage containing a big wildcat the warden had trapped. It hissed and spat wickedly when we passed. The store lady offered me a newspaper to read, the first I had seen in nearly 2 weeks. I sat on a bench by the pot-bellied stove to read it, but put it aside after scarcely a glance. The doings of the outside world no longer interested me. Only the long cruise was important now. Back at Wallace Gap, the warden asked where I planned to stay the night. When I shrugged and said wherever I happened to be, he offered to take me down to a campground near his home and bring me back up in the morning. At the campground, he gave the boy a long look. The boy glanced at my small hand axe, then trotted off to the house and returned with a double-bitted axe, then borrowed my knife, which was more to his liking, and soon had a fire blazing in a fireplace. I peeled potatoes, started them cooking, and added the contents of a large can of vegetable soup. Mr. Buchanan said he often made that mixture himself, and that it was good eating. Meanwhile, a thunderstorm was approaching, and he said I might as well stay in the empty ranger shack down the road. It contained mattress beds and a chunk stove, practically a palace by present standards. He and the boy remained to talk until 10 o'clock. In one corner of the cabin was a small wall mirror. Happening to glance in it, I drew back, amazed. My face was drawn thin, my eyes wide and staring, and my hair gone wild. No wonder he had stared at me so strangely at first, probably thought me a fugitive from the chain gang. A morning knock on the door awakened me. It was the boy, to make sure I was awake and to start the fire again. Soon a horn sounded. I toted the pack outside, then gawked in amazement. Perched on the hood, fenders and trunk of the old coupe were at least a half-dozen kids, leaving the seat inside for me. With such a load, the old car was seldom out of low gear all the way to the gap, where they were meeting the school bus. Since the mailman wasn't due until 10 o'clock, Mr. Buchanan drove me around the town, pointing out the ruins of the big house where the logging boss had lived. He obviously was proud of his Nantahala domain, said he had been promoted to the dismal swamp one time, but soon transferred back to the mountains. After letting me off at the store, he resumed his duties of patrolling the national forest and trapping predators. The mailman had no letters for me, and I prepared to leave. The store lady was disappointed, said she had planned to feed me a big slice of country ham for dinner, but didn't insist when I got that faraway look in my eyes, and said lots of miles lay ahead and I already had tarried long. A few miles north of Wallace Gap, the trail became narrow and treacherous along leaf-strewn slopes. Footing was uncertain, and a slip could mean a long, sliding fall. Reaction in such cases is to sprawl and get as much traction as possible. On rocks, the opposite is best. Risk arm injury to avoid leg injury. By repeatedly self-instructing for different dangers, the necessary reflexes can be acquired. It's much like programming a computer. Lone travel means high risks, and the margin of safety must be increased in any way possible. I've never had a serious injury in a lifetime of hiking, including many work trips, and firmly believe this mental preparation is the main reason.